All right, so Apple's new M3 chips are officially out, and they're promising, as always, to just completely extend their lead in performance. But if you look past all the shiny marketing, you start to find a bit of a puzzle. Some of the key specs have actually gone down. So what is really going on inside Apple's latest silicon? Let's dig in and figure this out.
And right here, this is the central mystery of this new generation. The chips are absolutely packed with more transistors, which are the fundamental building blocks, but then some of the headline specs, like core counts, have actually been reduced. How does that make any sense at all? Well, today we're going to solve this thing piece by piece.
Okay, the very first puzzle we need to tackle is the M3 Pro. Because when you just look at the raw numbers, the specifications, it seems like a really strange and frankly obvious step backward from what came before. On paper, it just doesn't look great.
I mean, just look at this side by side. The M2 Pro had 8 high-performance CPU cores. The M3 Pro now only has 6. The GPU also lost a core, going from 19 down to 18. But maybe the biggest surprise here is the memory interface. Think of it like the data highway to the chip. It's been narrowed by a full 25%. In pretty much every key metric you'd look at, the numbers are smaller.
And it goes even deeper than that. The M3 Pro is built with 37 billion transistors, which sounds like a ton, right? Well, it is, until you realize that's 3 billion fewer than the chip it's replacing. Yeah, they actually removed transistors. So what on earth is happening here?
Well, it turns out the answer isn't found by looking deeper into the silicon, but by zooming way out and looking at Apple's business strategy. The reason for this change is all about something called product segmentation.
So what is product segmentation? It's really just a fancy way of saying you create clear, good, better, best tiers for your products. The whole goal is to give customers a really compelling reason to spend a little more money to get to that next step up. And with their last generation of chips, that's exactly where Apple had a problem.
So here's the heart of it. In the past, the Pro chip was basically just a slightly trimmed down version of the top-tier Max chip, but critically, it had the exact same powerful CPU. This made the Pro an unbelievable deal, so good in fact that most people had basically no reason to pay more for the Max. Apple needed to create a bigger gap, a much clearer reason for you to upgrade. The M3 Pro with its reduced specs is that gap.
All right, so let's move on to our second puzzle, and you'll see how this all connects. While the M3 Pro was shrinking, the base M3 chip was doing the exact opposite. It saw this massive increase in its transistor count, even though, on paper, its core counts didn't really change at all. Just look at the evolution of the base M-series chip. The CPU core count has been locked at 8 since the very beginning. The GPU got a little bump with the M2 and then stayed put. But look at that transistor count. It has exploded from 16 billion all the way to 25 billion. That is a massive 56% increase in the raw building blocks of the chip, with almost no change to the headline features.
And that brings us to the core of our investigation for this section. The M3 chip has 5 billion more transistors than the M2, but no new major features to show for it. So where did they all go?
Okay, let's look at the suspects. Could it be the neural engine? Apple's AI brain? Nope. Actually, relative to the total chip size, the neural engine has gotten smaller and smaller. It's now using only about 3% of the die area, compared to 6% on the M1. Okay, so what about the CPU cores? Well, they have grown, they are more complex, but not nearly enough to account for that huge 5 billion transistor jump. We have to look elsewhere.
And that brings us to the main culprit, the number one reason for this explosion in transistor count. A completely redesigned, totally revolutionary new GPU architecture. This is where those billions of transistors have been hiding.
The GPU is now the single largest part of every single M3 chip. It starts at nearly a quarter of the die on the base M3, and on the M3 Max, it is an absolute monster, taking up over a third of the entire chip. This tells you exactly where Apple spent its transistor budget. This whole generation is built around graphics.
And here's the real key. It's not about just adding more cores. It's that each individual GPU core in the M3 is vastly more complex. We're talking almost 50% more transistors than a core from the M2 generation. The revolution is happening inside the cores themselves. The scale of this change is so significant that deep analysis of the architecture concludes that Apple has, and I'm quoting here, achieved nothing less than a graphics revolution with this new design. It's not just an update. It's a fundamental shift in how they do things.
So, what is this revolution? Well, it's a new feature called a dynamic shared cache system. Instead of having fixed, separate pools of memory for different kinds of data, the M3 GPU can allocate memory on the fly for whatever it needs most at that exact moment. This dramatically reduces wasted resources, cuts down overhead, and leads to way higher efficiency. It's a major, major departure from how GPUs have traditionally been built.
So we've solved the what and the why, but how is any of this even possible? Well, the answer lies in the foundational manufacturing technology that powers this entire M3 family. For the first time ever in a consumer computer chip, Apple is using TSMC's cutting-edge N3B process, which is a 3-nanometer node. Now, this isn't just a small, incremental improvement. It's a massive leap forward in how densely you can pack transistors together. And that move to 3 nanometer is what makes this all possible. This new process allows Apple to pack transistors so incredibly densely that they can fit an unbelievable 92 billion of them onto a single piece of silicon for the M3 Max. On the older tech, a chip that complex simply couldn't be built. It wasn't physically possible. Okay, so we've gone deep into the silicon and into the business strategy. Let's pull it all together and just summarize the key takeaways from our investigation into this M3 generation. There are really 3 defining changes here. First, and definitely most important, is that completely overhauled GPU architecture. It's a true game changer. Second is the strategic shift for the M3 Pro. It's now its own unique chip, not just a cut-down Max, and that creates much clearer product tiers. And third, all of this is enabled by that industry-first 3-nanometer node, allowing for these just unprecedented transistor densities.
Which leaves us with one final thought. Apple made a strategic choice to reposition the M3 Pro, creating what looks like a downgrade on paper, all to build a more coherent and, let's be honest, profitable lineup. So the real question is, from a consumer's point of view, is that smarter business strategy and chip design worth what feels like a step back in the specs? That's definitely something to think about.